About a year ago, I shared with you a productivity experiment that I was planning to do in 2018, which was a spreadsheet where I was tracking 3 aspects of my life every week. And since 2018 is over, I wanted to give that a review and talk about how useful or not useful that experiment turned out to be. Hello, I'm Shane from activegrowth.com. And so a year ago I shared what I call the Challenges, Focus Skills and Books spreadsheet. This was a spreadsheet where you had 52 little squares and you could track your challenges, such as, record a video every day for 30 days. You could record what I call focus skills, certain skills that I wanted to learn or focus on in my private life and in my business, and track which books I was reading. The idea was that having a weekly check-in and just keeping track of these 3 aspects of my life would help me stay on track and be a bit more consistent, and hopefully, just make me more productive and make it easier for me to reach my goals. So how did it turn out? So the results from this experiment are mixed, and I was actually quite surprised that, in what ways this did and didn't work out for me in the end. So first, one way in which I think this experiment failed was that the weekly cadence just wasn't as useful as I was hoping it would be. I ended up not using it all the year through, and that is in part because, for example, for the challenges, even when I was doing challenges, it's just so much more useful to track a challenge day by day, and I did that anyway. So I was using an app to track the daily progress of a challenge, but then the weekly check-in just wasn't as useful. It's something that would be useful if I had done it all year to kind of look back. That would be somewhat useful, or maybe at least it would be satisfying to see, here's the challenges I did and how long each one took. But overall, it didn't quite work, right? Because if I track my challenges daily, that works. I have a daily reminder to stay on track. I get this feedback of, okay, I've done 10 days in a row now and stuff like that. That works. But the weekly check-in there, that was the least useful part, right? The first thing with the challenges, that was the least useful part in this spreadsheet. And I think it's because it was weekly that I ended up not doing it all the way through, although that's also just a lack of consistency on my part. One of my weaknesses is that I just constantly try new things. I'm constantly experimenting with new things. And so I was just changing systems and things so often that halfway through the year, I basically abandoned this specific system. I wouldn't necessarily blame the system for that. That's more like a personal weakness. But having said that, I did benefit from doing this experiment. And surprisingly, the most useful aspect of it was the tracking of books. So reading has always been a super important part of my life. I've gotten immense value out of reading, and it's sometimes unbelievable to me how, a book that costs $10 to $20 can be so valuable. So reading more is generally a good goal to have, in my opinion. And so this was just a simple way to track what books am I reading, and it had 2 effects that were very good. First of all, it made me a bit more disciplined about actually finishing books before starting new ones. I was still often reading 2 books at a time, but not more than that. So instead of having 5 books that I'm halfway through, I would actually finish books and then start a new book. So that helped. And also, I was just reading more. I ended up finishing 38 books in 2018, which is more than my average. My average is probably about 1 to 2 a month. So it's definitely more books than usual. And there were still some that I didn't finish. And sometimes I just read half a book or so and I don't get value out of it, so I just leave it. But for sure, I finished most of the books I started. I think all of the ones I didn't finish are just ones that are not worth finishing. But in total, I finished reading 38 books. And it was a great year for me for reading. Many great books that really left an impression. Some of the ones that come to mind that, that really affected me or that really changed my perspective in valuable ways were Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, I believe is his name, and Selfie by Storr, and 10 Arguments for Quitting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, something like that, by Jaron Lanier. And in fact, in the post, in the written post for this, I will add my favorites from those books I read in 2018. So that was a massive benefit for me. It made my 2018 better that I started tracking these books I was reading and that I read more books than usual. So that's a huge success. And then finally, surprisingly, I think even the focus skills was useful for me. It felt like it was the least useful thing because it's kind of vague, right? What exactly is a focus skill? What am I doing here? But here's the thing. What I noticed is that in 2018, in general, my physical development was pretty neglected, right? My training was not very consistent. It was all over the place. It was interrupted many times by travel or other things. And it's not a good year for me in terms of physical training. But I did notice that, I did manage to drastically improve my muscle up. So I went from not being able to do a muscle up at all to being able to do ring muscle ups very consistently. Then also bar muscle ups I can do pretty well now, and I couldn't do them at all. I would like to do a strict bar muscle up, and I can't do that yet, but still, I definitely made a lot of progress there. My handstand also got a lot better. It's still not, it's still not like a rock solid handstand, but more often than not, I can hold a handstand for a while. And those were things that were in my focus skills. And so, even though it felt like it didn't really make a difference, I think what happened was that because I got this reminder of that's something I wanted to focus on frequently, even when I wasn't really doing it deliberately, more often than not, I was doing stuff to work on my pull-up strength and just work on my muscle up, and more often than not, I would do handstands. It's almost like a subconscious thing that eventually got me this result, right? Almost by accident. So that was really interesting to see. Another one I had there was delegation, and I've definitely gotten lots better at delegation in 2018. And that's an interesting effect to me because I think what happened here, and I've noticed this a couple of times before, that sometimes when you write down a goal, even when you forget about it, you kind of still steer your life towards that goal. Now, I don't believe that there's anything supernatural going on here, just for the record, right? I don't think that this is like an affirmation or the universe delivers me what I asked for or anything like that. I think what simply happens is that if you set a clear goal and you focus on it for a while, even if you forget about it, it's like subconsciously you're still steering towards that goal, When in doubt, steer towards the thing, even if you think you've forgotten about it. And I think because so much of what we do is unconscious, so many of our actions are basically unconscious, that taking a goal in and kind of through repetition, letting it sink into your subconscious might be one of the reasons why you sometimes have this effect of accidentally reaching a goal that you basically forgot about. Now, this is also a very unscientific explanation, so I might be totally wrong, but certainly I have noticed this happen often enough that I think that maybe something like that is going on. So my overall conclusion for this experiment is that it was a strange mix between a failure and a success, right? Because for sure this would have been way better if I had stuck with it, kept doing it for the whole year. That would have been better, and I could have come to a more solid conclusion about whether this is a good tool to use or not. So in that sense, it was a failure because I gave up on it. And for sure, especially the challenge tracking just doesn't work on a weekly basis. On the other hand, I'm really glad that I started this experiment, and it did make my year better. And I think this is, if there's one takeaway here is that, okay, maybe you shouldn't use this tracking sheet. It wasn't that great of a tool in the end. But if there is one thing that I encourage you to learn from this is to do this experimentation. I think the fact that I have this experimenting mindset and I'm constantly eager to try new things and constantly eager to try things without abandoning things all the time, right? I was doing this for several months before I stopped doing it, right? But having this kind of eagerness to try things out and see some results, see what happens, I think that is something that really helps me grow, and that's something that made 2018 a successful year for me. So there you go. We have a bit of closure on how this experiment went, and hopefully from this video you can learn a few things, or this inspires you to do a few things that will make your 2019 a better year.